Hey guys, so this week we're talking about relational and non-relational databases, or SQL, NoSQL. Starting the discussion is looking at a video that features Carrie Osborne, who was one of the original program writers for Oracle. And he talks about how it was one of the first to write in C, which was a more portable than the previous languages. And he describes this back then in the Oracle days when it first started, it was like the Wild Wild West, as he describes. And he alludes to the fact that we are back in what he describes as the Wild Wild West of the cloud technology. He predicts that a multi cloud NoSQL world is going to dominate as Oracle continues to fall farther back behind the three giants right now, which are Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. He said even though that these companies, everybody wants to know who's going to win out of the three big, he said that it's important to pay attention to marketing. He's like, because Oracle wasn't necessarily the best back in the day, but he's like, they were better at marketing their product. He said Google is super smart. He's like, but they've not always been the greatest at selling to enterprises. He said that with Curry moving there, it'll help them substantially, whereas Microsoft has always been really good at selling to enterprises. And at last, Amazon was the first, and they have a huge head start. He says most likely, though, he was like, big enterprises will have their data spread across the three main vendors. Looking at why relational databases are falling so far behind non-relational databases is really comes down to the ability to scale. It's really a intense process and expensive to keep upgrading relational databases, and at some point they just can't hold any more data. Um, relational databases scale vertically while non-relational databases scale horizontally. And Xavier, in the second reference I posted, gives a really great analogy of one being like a building that's adding floors each time, where non-relational is adding buildings each time they're expanding or scaling. Non-relational databases are a key value store. So a key is a barcode and name as a value. This can seem more restrictive, but with JSON documents, it can actually contain more data, like including price and description. And then you can also split across servers. And to give you an example of what this looks like is a lot of cloud promoters promote NoSQL, and Apple has 75,000 servers. And then another example of a NoSQL in a cloud provider is Amazon. On Amazon Prime Day, their database peaks at 45 million requests per second. So with each of these databases, they contain different specific data, and it doesn't have to be defined. It can be anything. The same process can be applied to non-relational, and it's called sharding, but it's a pretty costly process to do that, where this service is already included in most cloud-based NoSQL options. So the primary key uses hash functions that assign numbers within a fixed number range to identify what data is stored within each of the servers. If one server begins not to be enough storage, and a second can be added. So the first servers would contain the keys 1 through 50, and then the second server would have 50 through 100, and then it would continue on that process. And then this range is called a key space. So in order to calculate where an item is located, you have to keep track of which server is responsible. So NoSQL can almost scale without restriction. They also are schemaless, meaning that it does not have to have the same structure. And then where relational, you have to define it, and then the data must conform. So for non-relational, it's great because if your kind of data that you're storing changes frequently, it's a great one because it is changeable and constantly evolving. Where the other one, if you try to change the data structure, it could potentially cause you to lose data. So there are disadvantages to NoSQL or non-relational databases, and It can at times not be easy to retrieve data because in the process, they mirror the servers for redundancy. And once the data goes in, it takes a little bit longer for it to process the data before you can retrieve it. Now, they do offer solutions to combat that. Obviously, it'll be more expensive, but again, the relational databases offer a faster recall of the inputted data. So even while there are these disadvantages to NoSQL as predicted this month actually by Osborne, is that he foresees that Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, that none of them will really fail, that they'll continue. Like maybe some of them will outpace each other, but he does believe that most large enterprises will have their data structure. They'll use all their data structures and spread their data across the three companies. And that's what I have this week.